All right, here we are. I am confused. My brain is scrambled. I don't know what to do. I think I need a little commonsenseohioshow.com here on August 9, 2024. It's sort of a soft intro. I think I'll do something different today. But anyway, we are coming at you week in, week out, Common Sense Ohio, where you can get all your needs for common sense fulfilled and satisfied right here at the Roundtable, Channel 511. Couple little quick announcements. You can catch all our past episodes, ask questions, give us comments, do whatever you want at commonsenseohioshow.com. You can also do it right on YouTube or right in Facebook or whatever social media platforms you like. We are there. And we clip shorts and videos, reels. I don't know all that stuff. I got some kids who might, but it's all there. If you want to check out Norm's blog, he is prolific in his blogging, and you can check that at commonsenseohioshow.com. If you want to be a sponsor, we have a couple slots open. Shoot us a note. Where? commonsenseohioshow.com. The other thing I'm going to ask, we had, it looks like a good number of downloads this past month, and the show is catching on like wildfire. And we're just asking you to like and share. Tell your neighbor, tell your friend, say, look, you don't have to like these guys, but at least they're speaking common sense and they don't act like they know everything, but they do kick it around until they figure out some answers. And when they don't know, they don't know. When they do know, they tell you. And if we're right, we tell you. If we're wrong, we tell you. If we don't know, we tell you. That's common sense, guys. That's where progress is made. See, I incorporated progressive progress here right at the Roundtable on Common Sense Ohio Show. So, week in and week out, I've been doing World War II facts of the day, and it's always remarkable to me as a history major. The old saying, if you don't study history, you're doomed to repeat it or destined to repeat it. It turns out a lot of what we're facing today we've already treaded this ground. On this day in 1942, there were several, or I think 6 Nazi potential saboteurs executed. All right. Now, why does this matter? Well, because we've got a little thing going on right now with our Guantanamo Bay terrorists, but we'll get to that in a second. But what happened is it's a fascinating story. And I remember hearing something about this, but I confess I did some reading this morning. On June 13, 42, 4 men landed on a beach near Maghanset, Long Island, New York, from a German submarine. And what Germany was doing is they recruited 8 people. They came in 2 different groups of 4, and they landed ashore with a bunch of explosives and incendiary devices. And the idea was to bring the war to the United States. One of the things the U.S. had back in those days was some isolationism, and that was good and bad. We were isolated, and there was a lot of people in the wake of World War I that said, we don't want to get involved in this world mess. Sound familiar? And then there's the Germany was like, well, that's not fair. We're getting bombed. We've got to fight on our own land, and our people are getting killed. Let's bring that war to the United States. So we're going to send some guys over there incognito, and they're going to wreak some havoc. And it almost worked, much like a lot of these plots. They never quite actually work. One of the groups landed without incident, and they sort of made their way in. They buried their uniforms and clothing, etc. The other group that had a couple guys in it, and I'll say the names because I think it was Dash, D-A-S-C-H. I say that right, Norm? Dash.
Yeah, Dosh.
Yeah. And another guy named Berger. That's easy. So Dash decided, what happened is the Coast Guard sort of stumbled upon one of these guys, and he was wearing his swim trunks and no shirt, whatever, in the second group. And the guy offered a bribe to the Coast Guard and to keep quiet. And the Coast Guard, this is great stuff. Like, this is Americanism at its best. The Coast Guard says, I'll take your money, knowing full well that he's just going to play this out and try to glean more information. So it's like they played him. So what happens is they make it to a train station or whatever, but eventually Dosk decided that this wasn't good. His resolution to be a saboteur for the fatherland faltered, says this article. Perhaps he thought the whole project so grandiose as to be impractical and wanted to protect himself before some of his companions took action on similar doubts. He indicated, so in other words, if somebody's going to be this is stupid, they probably imagine landing in the United States and you're a bunch of Nazis and you're going to act like you live there. I mean, it's like, imagine how scary that would be.
And that's a huge feat in itself. If you we think there are plenty of eyes looking at our coast right now. During World War II,
sure,
we had private citizens, groups looking at the shores 24/7.
Yeah.
Every space to every mile.
Right. And we didn't have I don't think we had radar yet. We didn't have the modern technology, but people were suspicious.
Yeah.
It's sort of like infiltrating the country, learning how to be a pilot using American resources and getting in a plane. But we'll get to that. But anyway, they got scared, Dash, and told Berger, like, I don't think I want to go along with this. And they eventually called FBI headquarters and snitched and cooperated, and the whole thing was foiled. What is interesting about this, in what is a parallel for what's going on now, is that all these guys were eventually tried and convicted and sentenced to death. They were all given the death sentence. And 6 of them were actually executed. I'll see if I can get that date to the extent it was today. I guess they were executed. And then 2 of them, Hoover and I think one of the AGs involved, wrote a letter to Roosevelt and said, why don't we commute the sentences of Dash and Berger? And that Roosevelt eventually did. And they were given 30 years to life. Eventually they were sent back and deported and went on to, I guess, live, or at least Dash did. So, we back in 1942, we were willing to execute our prisoners of war, or these guys who were potential saboteurs. And, look, what's interesting about this is were these acts of war? Were these soldiers invading? Should they have been given a soldier's sentence, like, you go to a prison camp, or was it something different? And the rules of engagement all sort of go out the window, it seems, in the midst of something like World War II. And now we talked about this. Was it last week we talked about this? The prisoners of war, the 9/11 prisoners of war norm?
Well, Steve, just to interject, I believe under the Geneva Convention, which Germany and America were both signatories to, then the Japanese famously were not, by the way. And, he had the Burma Death March and things like that in Japan. But
Nanking,
Germany,
Nanking.
Yeah, Germany at least was a signatory. And I believe one of the, if you will, rules of war under the Geneva Convention is if you were not taken prisoner in uniform, then you could be considered outside of the Geneva Convention. You were then a saboteur or a spy or something. And these guys, of course, shed their uniforms after they hit the beach. Yeah. So they were not POWs. They were
not,
in a different classification.
In a different, but you can easily see how there was enough play in the joints where they could have done that. They could have treated them like POWs and sent them off. And obviously, times were, I think a lot of this has to do with the social attitude towards what's going on in some particular I think it was very easy for us to say, hang these bastards, and get this done quickly.
Well, Hitler had the same, you remember the Great Escape, for example, from the Stalag prison.
Yeah.
When those guys were caught, it was a Luftwaffe prison. And when they were caught, usually they would return them back to the prison. But technically, when Hitler ordered 50 of them to be executed, he was within the Geneva Convention because they weren't, obviously, when they escaped into Germany and tried to take train rides to Switzerland or whatever, they weren't in American uniforms or British uniforms.
Right.
So they were executed, and that actually was not a war crime for Hitler to do that under the Geneva Convention.
Well, and I think what we're talking about here was far more akin to a terrorist type of attack, right? I mean,
and of course, we were. I'm sure part of the mentality for the Nazis sending these guys by U-boat to land on the beach there in New Jersey or wherever you said. I'm sure part of the mentality was we were funding the milice, the French underground at the time, and they were blowing up German rails and,
that's right.
Like we were funding the same activities in German occupied areas and within Germany itself. So, I mean, we sent Mo Berg, a former Yankees catcher. He became an OSS agent. We sent him to assassinate Heisenberg, Theodore Heisenberg,
Yep.
In Switzerland. And he had a gun with him and walked Heisenberg back to the hotel trying to decide whether or not to kill him. And it turned out the Nazis did not have a good atom bomb program. So we were doing all kinds of espionage. And Hitler, I'm sure, his thinking was, I'm going to send agents to America and give them some of their own medicine.
Well, and you also have to note, I think it's worth noting here that the stuff that these guys were going to do, the attacks, in other words, were probably not designed to take on military targets. I think it was probably, it was probably going to be disruption of the infrastructure or whatever. And so civilians were going to die, and that's a very common theme we're looking at these days too. Is like, what is the civilian casualty, and how does that play into the strategies of war? And is it a legitimate? Is it illegitimate? Is it just something that we accept that happens? Well, I can tell you this: in July, same date, August 8 in July, or 1940. I don't know why I'm saying July. In 1940. On this day, the Home Secretary announced here's why. So the Home Secretary announces July civilian air raid casualty figures at 258 killed and 320 seriously injured. That's 1 month in 1940, right? That was before the real stuff started to happen. Yeah, well, certainly before the bomb, and before Dresden. This is like civilians were killed. And I didn't live in that time. I don't know what it felt like in that time. I don't know what the blowback in that time for civilian casualties was. But looking back on it, I think it started as something that was to be avoided. It ended as something that was just part of it.
Got numb to it.
Yeah, we got numb to it.
Yeah.
I know, Steve, that you admire the writing and speeches of Winston Churchill. And he had this phrase that the truth is protected by a bodyguard of lies. And not only were we killing their civilians, get this story. Winston Churchill had to make a decision not to give away the fact that the British had radar that could detect incoming Luftwaffe bombings. Because he did not want to give away that secret. So he allowed Germany to bomb British towns and cities for a short period of time. He permitted his own people to be killed in order to protect this national security secret about British radar.
Can you imagine?
Can you imagine? Right.
Can you imagine what that took?
Yeah.
And took away from him in his life. I mean, it's like you don't just, and Churchill was a guy who cared. But he was a tough son of a bitch too, and he was a smart guy, and he saw this for what it was. Where there, we've got it. This is everything on the line right now.
This is total warfare. Total warfare.
Well,
to the point. You sacrifice your own people if necessary to protect a strategic asset.
This was a fight for their very existence.
Yes,
and that kind of sacrifice was necessary to win it. I mean, that's how desperate things were back then. And imagine, look, France didn't stand up to this. And in a lot of ways, at first, the U.S. didn't either. I mean, we were sort of sitting back waiting, and Churchill was on his own, out there on his own little island, literally, and making these decisions that were just, historically the most significant decisions ever made. Really, I mean, it's really amazing.
It completely
from deciding that we're going to take on Hitler and we'll do it alone, damn it, if we have to, and on the beaches, it's like he's going to do it, and that's it. So I mean, look, in today's day and age, we're sitting as a parallel. We're sitting on these prisoners, and last week we talked about these terrorists, and there was a decision by Department of Justice to offer a plea negotiation or a plea
Department
deal.
of Defense
To offer a plea deal of life in prison for these terrorists on 9/11, and now, Norm, I guess they've reversed that decision.
Yeah, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, he claimed that the general in charge of the legal team that offered this plea agreement, he's claimed that he was not briefed ahead of time, and yet
the general didn't brief him.
Yeah, he was not. He did not have advance notice. He heard about it on the news like everybody else, I guess. And this entire decision about whether or not to grant them life because of the waterboarding, or to proceed with the death penalty charges and a trial. And this is all 20 years later, right? I mean, the submarine guys, they were executed within like 6-7 years of being arrested. But anyway, 20 years later, Lloyd Austin, SecDef, says his general in charge of these legal proceedings did not even tell him that they had decided to offer this plea deal. So he fired the general in charge of the Gitmo legal proceedings, and he reversed the decision. And so ostensibly, these three masterminds, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the guy who looks like John Belushi, and the other two, apparently they're going to go ahead and have a military tribunal and
decide execution.
I imagine they're going to get the death penalty.
Probably. Let me correct something, though, Norm, because I think it's important. The German saboteurs landed on June 13th, 42. They were executed on August 8th, 42. So, like,
wow, there you go. Right. That's pretty swift, Justin.
Less than 3 months later.
Yeah. And here we are 20 years later. The German saboteurs never killed anybody. 20 years later, after these guys killed 3,000 people, right? We're still. So this
sure.
all goes. There's been heavy criticism of both George Bush and Obama, and I'm sure Trump and Biden as well, that the military was kind of browbeaten into handling this as almost like a police, like a law enforcement action, instead of handling it like they did in World War II. Like, hey, you're saboteurs. You have no rights under the Geneva Convention. Bang, bang, you're dead.
And there was a big debate back then. Are they criminals or are they war criminals? You know, was this an act of, are we in war or is it not war? You know, it's like whatever it is. But either way, I mean, you would think the outcome should have been a bit swifter.
Yeah. So there was great outrage, not only by Republicans, but by Democrats and the families of the 9/11 victims who wanted to depose these three guys. They're like, don't kill them. I mean, don't give them a deal because they're going to clam up. They have no incentive to do what Daesh did and at least, you know, like openly confess or reveal, like if they cooperate with the families that are suing Saudi Arabia, for example, if they cooperate with their lawyers, I think it gives the terrorist lawyers a little bit of negotiating room. They can say, hey, these guys are cooperating.
Well, look,
what do they know though 20 years later?
Well, and what do they know that they haven't already told us 20 years later? I mean, so this is like, you know, can you think that do we really all think, three of us sitting here at this table, or anybody else reasonably think that the United States was ineffective in extracting information from these people over the last 20 years, or at least during the time that they were getting waterboarded and tortured or whatever was going on down there? I have a hunch that we have already obtained and extracted whatever information.
There's nothing else
to be had. So now it just comes down to what the hell do you do with it now? I mean, so this is all, to me, this is all political optics. You know, it's like they've been sitting down there for 20 years. We did these horrible things to these people that shocked the conscience of some people, that other people thought, well, this is what you should do to somebody because they are our sworn enemies. Let's get the information we need. After all, they hijacked planes and crashed them into our buildings and killed 3,000 people. It's like, you know, but the problem now is it's become political. And particularly, think how much the climate has changed since then. It's like now we've got sympathizers for Hamas. Who are, you know, I mean, these people are horrible terrorists killing babies. I mean, and that's, well, they've had such a rough existence that they should kill babies. It's like, it's bullshit. It's bullshit on every level, but it's become political. And now I think our government doesn't know what to do with it.
So Steve, there, you know, we like to think, you know, basically because we see Band of Brothers and, you know, Saving Private Ryan, we like to think that, like, as Americans, we want to believe that we were always ethical. And when somebody put their hands up in World War II, that we took them prisoner.
Far from it.
After Malmedy, you know, during the Bulge, when the SS under Joachim Peiper, when they machine gunned all of these U.S. these guys were road builders. They were engineers. and they mowed them down in a field and just left them, to freeze. They were dead.
And back to your point, they were wearing American uniform. They being
were wearing
the
American
Nazis
uniforms.
procured American uniforms, got behind those scenes, got behind enemy lines, and started switching fence posts or road signs, and confusing and doing all sorts of things. And
so under the Geneva Convention, that was a war crime, what they did.
Yeah.
And Joaquin Piper and that unit stood trial after the war for that war crime, and they were eventually exonerated because they couldn't prove that any order was ever issued for them to do that, that just some sergeant or lieutenant went off on his own and did that. And the allegation is that the management did not order that. But my point about that story is that our own 82nd Airborne and 101st, Screaming Eagles, for a few weeks after that incident, I'm told by veterans of both of those airborne divisions, they didn't take any effing prisoners.
Yeah.
They heard about the massacre, and yeah.
But that's what happens, right? It's like this is the seesaw that happens in war. Right. But so look, what does this mean for our prisoners now? I think this has become political. Too much time has gone past. So now it's a decision. Like I don't think anybody knows what to do with them. So put them on trial, have a decision, do whatever. But the reality is, and this may not be popular on one side or the other of the political fence. I don't care if they get life in prison. In fact, that may be worse for them, as I said last week, in some ways. Let them just rot in an American prison and die. If these people ideologically want to die for Allah or whatever the hell their belief is, don't let them do it.
Yeah. Although their attorneys are fighting like hell to keep them alive. So apparently they want to be alive.
No. But this is an interesting component to what I do for a living, right? I am a criminal defense attorney, and there are people that do this for the cause, and there are people that do it for the clients. A lot of death penalty litigators do it for the cause. And it's not, it's like, how can you argue with it? You can say the cause of saving lives and anti-death penalty lines up with your client's interests. And I think by and large, that's probably true. But look, I've had people, I've been involved in cases and heard of clients who say, just kill me. I don't want to spend life in prison. Just give me the death sentence. I'm not going to contest it. And the lawyers fight for the bigger picture of the cause. So look, the lawyers we're trained as criminal defense lawyers. We being criminal defense lawyers are trained, not me necessarily, but when we do court-appointed work, for instance, on a death penalty case, we have to go to seminars. And in Ohio, it's called Rule 20 certification. And Rule 20 certification, you have to go complete this 24 hours every 2 years or something, death penalty training in order to defend death penalty cases.
Wow.
Paid for by the court. So on like a public defender type thing. You can do it privately without that. But the teaching is anti-death penalty, completely anti-death penalty. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that's the ideology. So Americans would say death penalty bad. Other ethnic, other cultures, other countries may say something different, And look, in 1942, the death penalty was pretty ubiquitous and everybody accepted it. Now we don't. So times have changed, and this is the problem. This is like wokeness. It's like the functional equivalent of an ex post facto law. And we're looking at this with the lens, we're looking at 1942, these executions with the lens of 2024. And to some extent, we're looking at the 9/11 consequences with a lens 20 years old. And times have changed. Times have changed. And this is why you can't, if people are judging our founders because they may have owned slaves or whatever, for whatever purposes, and if you think that you're immune from whatever the cultural influences at the time, and if you'd go back in a time machine, without our perspective today, you'd have been different. I think that's a little bit arrogant. Things happened quickly at the time based on the influences of the time, based on what's going on at the time. We were in a world conflict in 1942. We executed these people immediately. And I think had this have gone to trial quicker in 9/11, these people had already been executed.
Oh, within the first year.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah.
Everybody's sentiment, was just done. Yeah.
I agree. Guys, this discussion about terrorists kind of feeds into the border revelations that Ohio's Congressman Jim Jordan, who chairs the House Judiciary Committee, he noted. I mean, it took a lot of waiting to get this data, but Homeland eventually coughed up data that 99 people on the terrorist watch list, okay, they're on the terrorist watch list, and they were apprehended by Customs and Border Patrol and processed and then released into America, into the country, pending their immigration review date with the immigration court. 99 people on the terrorist watch list, which just with a couple keystrokes on your keyboard, if Ahmed is a terrorist from Tajikistan, right? And he's in the database, and there he is standing in front of you, having crossed over, in Eagles Pass, Texas, and you're a CPB guy, right? And you got him. And then 3 days later, after he's processed, he is released into the country.
Yeah, this is gross, man. I mean, this is like,
it's unbelievable.
I hate the government. I cannot stand the government. I mean, it's like this kind of shit. I'm swearing too much today, but this kind of crap is so insanely frustrating.
Yeah.
And it's going to get whitewashed by the media who's on one side, and it'll get highlighted by the politics on the other side. I mean, but anybody who looks at this and says anything other than this is lunacy is not listening and not exercising common sense.
So what good is the list? What does it do?
Yes.
What does it activate? What is it when you're caught? When they find you, what's the process? Now he's waiting to be. That doesn't. It's like we're missing a step here.
Something
isn't right with this.
Nobody. And I mean, look, and if somebody is cool with letting terrorists go free in our country, then that person's a criminal. I mean, this is not. One's easy.
Why have the list?
This one's easy. It's like, I mean, have I taken a red pill for the past? Maybe I have. Maybe I've slowly taken a red pill for the past 30 years, representing folks charged with crimes, watching government incompetence prosecute crimes. And you can say most of the time they get it right, and that's probably true. But you can also, I've also seen so many times when it's just folly at the highest order. It's like I'm working on a case right now where there's 3 witnesses to a crime. Like in the same bed of an alleged rape, there's 3 witnesses, and the police didn't interview them. And it's like, what's going on in the world? And, so I guess I'm only saying this to say I think generally people have a comfort level that if the government is doing something, it's doing it well. And I think quite the opposite is true. I really do. I think we've gotten to a point where if the government's it's doing something, it's not doing it well, it's doing it crappy. And if we, the people, don't monitor this, expose it, and push back on it, now we're getting shouted down as being, whatever, you're a racist or you're this or that if you start pointing this stuff out. But this is insane. This is utter insanity.
Utter insanity.
Yeah. Well, your point of, the government we think the government's doing the right thing when they're in action. And I just saw this pop up today that this session of Congress only passed 78 laws.
Right. They did nothing. Right.
Yes. They did nothing. That's a good thing.
It just is.
Isn't that great? That's
great, except for this. They didn't have to pass any additional laws because they've delegated everything to the administrative, unrepresentative body of government, which is...
And it only happened because of all the infighting between their respective parties.
Look, no matter...
how many upvotes, downvotes they had for, the beginning of the session. And that was, 3-month ordeal,
I think. Folly.
But they still got 78 public laws passed, though. But I'm thinking 78. Yes, that's a good low number.
Yeah, keep it lower. Or
that's fine.
Look, and maybe this is a way to turn to the election. It's like, if nothing else, I pray that we have a split up government, that whoever gets the White House doesn't get Congress.
Exactly.
This always sounds cynical. But in reality, many of us, I'll speak for myself, and I think, Steve, you kind of, referred to yourself this way also. I am totally pro gridlock.
Yes.
Right.
Totally,
because a lot more gets done better. because of gridlock.
Yeah.
Well, look,
More discussions happen, more
if we
it comes out in the open.
and that's a more nuanced view, and it's probably more accurate. But
Yeah.
I look at it this way: the government sucks. It's terrible.
Yeah.
It doesn't do anything really well.
Yeah.
So the less it does, the better. The less damage it can do. And
slow the hell down.
Right. The less, and as Thomas Sowell says, the problem with policies of the government, and particularly the administrative state and the executive orders, is that they're never judged by the outcome, only by the intent. And so if your goal is fair housing for free housing for all, it's like you invoke or you enact all these stupid policies that result in like financial disaster that happens in 2008. But the goal was to get everybody fair housing or whatever.
Well, the goal was the news coverage of you passing it with your name on it and not following up 5 years later on what really happened.
And the footnote is the people who enact that debacle aren't the ones judged by it, because by the time it all comes to fruition, they're gone.
They're gone.
It's like, or they, what the other, and the people who are still around, what do they say? Well, wasn't our fault. You guys just wouldn't let me do more.
Was it Ben Franklin or somebody, the old aphorism that the path to hell is paved with good intentions?
Yeah.
And,
well, and the founders
that's such
intended,
a rough saying, but
it's true.
It has a lot of truism to it.
And the founders intended on a federal government that was weak and unable to effectuate things. So when I hear one side or the other say, well, we need the federal government can fix this, do that, or do whatever. It's like, no, it can't. It can't do it. It's not smart enough to do it. It's not good enough to do it. And most of the time, it's not possible to do it, even if they were smart enough and good enough. So this is not like, if you think that you've got the solution for whatever and just give me the governmental power to execute it, then again, that's narcissism of the highest order.
Yeah. One
mic
last
drop moment.
Mic drop. Yeah, I know.
One last little kind of tie-in to the illegal immigration thing. Here in Ohio, the Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, who's been on our program, by the way, he is in charge of the voter rolls in Ohio. He has found 500 non-citizens registered to vote, and he excised them off of the voter rolls. But massively, he has found 155,000 Ohio registered voters that are either dead, they're duplicates, or they're inactive after several years of not voting, in some sort of category where he has dropped them from the voter rolls. And we have had elections in Ohio of these 500 illegals that are non-citizens that were registered. We've had state representatives in Ohio that have the race between one or the other candidate has come down to a single vote. So the people who say, 500 people, that's very minimal for illegals to be registered. Well, I mean, we've had people not win office in Ohio over a single vote.
Well, look.
So every vote does matter.
We get the 500 illegals that are registered to vote. What in our system did not catch that?
Yeah. How does that happen?
How does that happen? I mean, LaRose comes in and becomes the hero. It's like, look what I found. It's like,
it happened.
It happened though.
Yeah.
How did 500 and the 150? That's a cleansing. You get dead people. That's right. That makes sense. It's a purge.
Right?
People die. I mean, you just have to. Or they are inactive for what is it, a 3 or 4 year period or something like that?
Yeah.
And that's easy enough to re-register and go vote, and that's cool. But how did that 500 happen under anybody's watch?
Under anybody's watch, how does that go down? Right.
Well, we did have this system where you could waddle in to the voting, poll to the voting location. You could waddle in and your identification could be as little as a utility bill in your name. That was enough to identify you as a legitimate voter, believe it or not.
Yeah. But both parties are at the poll accepting it though.
Yep.
Yeah. Because
it's still not right. Yeah.
Well, we were too chicken until recently to pass a voter ID law that required a photo ID, which we now have in Ohio.
Yeah. Which is again, photo IDs are easy enough to get through the city if you are homeless per se, because it gets you eligible for some help.
Yeah.
So you can get a voter, you can get that ID fairly easily.
I do not
which is
buy,
good, which is fine.
I just don't subscribe to this argument that it's racist to have require photo ID.
Right. That's where I was going with it, basically.
I think it's racist not to, or the arguments in favor of not requiring it are racist. Like if you think that there's a minority group or an ethnic group or anybody else in the country that is not capable of obtaining a photo ID because of their race or their status, like just go ask that group if they have a photo ID, and almost all of them will pull them out.
How do you exist without one today?
Brett,
I mean, it's rough if you don't. It's rough.
I think was it George Bush the first or the second used to say about these issues that it's actually bigotry to have low expectations of minorities.
The soft bigotry of low expectations.
That's true.
Old saying.
Are you kidding me? Are you telling me Ben Carson, or Barack Obama?
Or anybody else whose skin color is different than white? Are they so inept that they can't get an ID?
And that we don't have safety measures in place that can help them get an ID.
Well, that's right.
Too. So the social groups, the nonprofits that are out there to help out.
Here's where it always, my response to these arguments is always the same. Well, look, your government, your being the person promoting this argument, seems to be capable of almost everything. Is it not also capable of creating only identification cards for voting and then go give them out to citizens? Like you're going and knocking on doors and harvesting votes from people. Why not go out and harvest IDs for people and give them an ID? Go around with a mobile device that prints out an ID that says, hey, what's your name? Good. Yeah, we know you. Here, you're right on our rolls. Here's an ID. Now you can vote. Why do you have to go vote for them? Right? It's like, it's like they don't want to hear that because that's a solution that eliminates the voter fraud.
Yeah, the harvesting. Yeah.
Right. Or the harvesting, or worse, the voter fraud. Yeah.
Or right. Yeah.
And gets people IDs to do everything else they need to do in our society.
So can we switch to this big victory for Elon Musk and for Rumble that happened yesterday?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
This was a little inside baseball, and I don't know if it'll ever hit like mainstream media. But yesterday, a World Economic Forum, WEF, what do you call him, Steve? Spectre. These guys are affiliated with an organization called the World Federation of Advertisers. Okay, they're like sister organizations. The World Federation of Advertisers started a project called the Global Alliance for Responsible Media,
GARM.
or GARM, if you want to use the acronym, GARM.
Yeah.
Yesterday, the World Federation of Advertisers decided to, after Elon sued them and Rumble sued them, and I'll tell you why in just a second, but they decided yesterday to dissolve this GARM organization. So what GARM was doing, it started in 2019, before the 2020 elections, before COVID. And what they decided to do was, if they couldn't create a ministry of truth, which, Biden tried to establish, and then he went back on that, the WEF wanted to basically control what is true, quote, what is the truth, right? A truth ministry. And the way they would do this is by taking advertising dollars away from any platform or show like ours, or, more significant shows like Tucker Carlson or, whoever.
And it went on the other,
or Twitter.
Yeah, and it went on it did the other side as well, too, that there were a lot of black focused podcasters that were on that GARM list.
That's right.
That did not get advertising because their systems didn't understand the cultural content that they were talking about. Mm-hmm. So they were on the list. They were on the no buy zone. Yeah.
So the GARM list, it included ostensibly hate speechers, right? Mm-hmm. So it's hate speech, right? To discuss election reform, which we just did about voting reform. That would be considered hate speech because we're trying to disenfranchise minorities from voting because we want voter ID, that kind of thing, and misinformation and disinformation. So this became how they throttled people, platforms where people wanted to discuss alternatives to treating COVID or what COVID was about, or other theories talking about how it, the origination of COVID. This
Same
all
thing.
became so under our own. So Americans naturally picked up on this, and under Biden, the Department of Defense let out millions of dollars in contracts to the United States version of GARM called NewsGuard. And listen to the people that are on the board of NewsGuard, okay? Ex-CIA director Mike Hayden, Michelle Sumilis, former head of the Gates Foundation, Samantha Powers, head of the U.S. UN delegation under Obama, Jimmy Wales, founder of Wikipedia, Tom Ridge, ex-head of Homeland Security, and Richard Stengel, former Undersecretary of State under Obama.
Yeah, so, that's Spectre.
I mean, come on. These people are deciding what is misinformation and disinformation. And then what they did, and the reason Elon sued them, is they told Ford, Coca-Cola, Google, Microsoft, all of these big advertisers, hey, you want to do business with the Department of Defense and the State Department? Guess what? These are not approved platforms because they put out hate speech and disinformation.
Right. So look, these companies are going to obviously they're just say, well, fine, we'll just go spend our dollars anywhere else. I mean,
that's right.
This is this stuff is abhorrent to me. I mean, on every level, this stuff is abhorrent.
It's outsourcing censorship,
and it's like, how is it? On a more esoteric note, how is it that Elon Musk happens to exist today? It's like without that guy, so much would be different.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I was thinking about him the other day. I was watching this interview between Elon Musk and Don Lemon. And Elon basically just dismantles the guy. I mean, it's about this stuff where, Lemon's talking about censorship and hate speech, and Musk's like, yeah, you're in favor of censorship. And Lemon's like, no, I'm not. He goes, well, yes, you are. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Like, I just favor hate speech, says Lemon. And it's like, right, you want to censor our speech. Because when you say hate speech, it casts such a broad net that you can fit whatever you want politically within that net. And then justify censoring it. And if you add the government behind it using a lever, right? Like, we won't give you contracts, or you will be at the bottom of the contract list just coincidentally, unless you follow our rules. Well, then that's a government lever of power that is censorship. And that is tantamount to the Department of Truth, right? The Ministry of Truth, as in Orwell 1984.
Yeah. It's just, these organizations develop like GARM because you have these large advertising bodies, the Pepsis, the Coca-Colas, the GM, the Fords of the world, because they're too damn lazy to figure out where they should or shouldn't be. They don't want to be anywhere that's negative or looks bad for them. So they have to rely on these organizations, outsourced organizations that have a bad filter.
I think it might be more than that. I think
in part.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not necessarily disagreeing, but what I'm worried about is that these big companies are subscribing to these organizations because they know that's what the federal government wants them to do.
And there's a piece to that too. Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
and it is easier for them to. Sure. It's easier in a way because they can say, "Look, I just did what you guys said to do, so leave me alone."
Yeah. Well, we had the same situation when I was working in radio. The Blitz started carrying Howard Stern. Well, if you carried Howard Stern or Rush Limbaugh, you were on a blacklist.
Really?
And some advertisers that was a no touch. You don't touch that station. You don't touch that time, that drive period, and when it was. Rush was always on that. Stern was on that for a while. And advertisers started to get smarter about it because that was media agencies that were lazy and didn't understand who was actually listening, didn't want to be part of any controversial programming. Right. Well, not understanding, like, wait a minute, your potential buyers are on. They're listening to that show.
Yes.
So kind of put up with it.
It's both things are true because those people, the smaller advertisers, advertisers weren't as susceptible to the government lever because they weren't in that sphere of influence that mattered.
They didn't have, they weren't under the contracts.
But there's something bigger going on here. What's going on here is fascism, right? In a huge way.
Yes, it is.
So everybody would say back in 2008, well, the government didn't control the banks. Well, BS. The government absolutely controlled the banks because the government regulates things down to where you can put a bank in a particular city. And everything is regulated. So if you think you're going to go apply for a permit or you think you're just going to go build a bank on a corner and start a bank, no, you got to plow through a bunch of government regulation.
You open up an account at a bank. How many pieces of paper do you have to sign?
That's right.
It's because of regulation.
And they can regulate you collaterally out of existence or even stop your existence to begin with. So you're going to go play nice with the government and do it at once because that's in your financial interest to do it, or even maybe in your own, your quest to exist at all. So the same thing is the government has done this outwardly and inwardly for years. It's like conditional funding for highways. You want to have your highways fixed, and you got to make the drinking age 21
and speed limit only 65.
65, right? If you want 60, if you have 70, we're not going to give you money. It's like these are the sort of the backwards, soft, indirect governmental control. And when the government takes control of private and public business, public corporation businesses, that's fascism. That's what it is. It's just done backwards way.
It's interesting to look at the bureaucratic method. So to give themselves plausible deniability, the State Department and the Department of Defense, they outsource the listing of who the bad guys are, who the disinformation people are, and the hate speechers are, to this News Guard organization that's headed by, the revolving door swampers.
Yeah,
right?
partisan swampers. Yeah, absolutely.
And then they write a report. It goes back to DOD and state, and then state, puts out this information to its advertising partners that do business with the federal government. And it becomes like, hey, we're not telling you, but we're recommending, right? Just like Elvis Chan out there in Silicon Valley, the FBI agent. Hey, we're just recommending you like your Section 230 protections here at Twitter, don't you? So we're just recommending that you do not put on, this particular show, Dan Bongino or whoever, deplatform him off of your network, take his Twitter account down, whatever.
So this is creating a schism in society. I mean, you're already seeing it like with Rumble and some of these other platforms. They're like, you know what, screw you. We're not going to play in your sandbox anymore. We're going to go do our own. And now I wonder, so now it's more exposed. So not only is the government, not only is Rumble's, so if you're going to go create your own, so to speak, and create a parallel existence, your neck is out, but it is also in the public when your neck gets cut or when your head gets cut off. So when the government.
So Jim Jordan on this decision yesterday to roll up GARM, Jim Jordan called it a big win for oversight that, Elon Musk and the House Judiciary Committee and other people, free speech, even liberal ones like Matt Taibbi, the journalist who put out all those Twitter files with Elon Musk, he is no Republican. He's no conservative. If you read Matt Taibbi's books and articles, he's a flaming lefty, but he believes in free speech, like Alan Dershowitz and other classic liberals who may have very progressive views, but they think free speech is sacred. And we're losing some of those liberals. And it's really good to see Matt Taibbi and other liberals. Who's the guy that I guess he's in Australia now, the head of WikiLeaks. People like that stick up for free speech.
Well, Elon Musk, 20 years ago or, however long ago, I look at Musk and I saw him as completely different.
Yes.
But he's a classical liberal who has sort of said, not on my watch. And I've got so much power, so much money, and so much, I don't give an F that you can't move me. You cannot get to me.
But his empire was built on government subsidies for Tesla,
absolutely.
though.
Yeah, absolutely.
You think about it.
That's like 20 years ago. I looked at it like this was he was built on subsidies, and I still think Tesla is look, I still think electric cars are a stupid product, and at least until they can exist without subsidies.
Right.
Yeah, to Brett's point, I read in Bloomberg or one of the papers that covers the automotive industry, and 30% of Tesla's profit is from government subsidies.
Yeah.
30%. I mean, that's massive, right?
It is. Yeah. If that gets pulled away, he shuts down. That's a shutdown number. That truly is. So, yeah. You can't make that up. Yeah.
It sure is.
Yeah.
It sure is.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
All right. Well, let's talk about
local news, guys.
Okay.
Did you catch that the Browns, I think yesterday, the Cleveland Browns NFL team announced that it is going to build a $2.4 billion new stadium in Brook Park, Ohio, which is a suburb south of Cleveland, pretty far south of downtown Cleveland. So they're going to get off the lakefront because the FAA will not let them build a dome over the existing Browns stadium because it blocks, I guess, some kind of airspace for the general aircraft airport right there, Burke Lakefront Airport. So under that mentality, or using that as the onus, they're asking local government and the state of Ohio to provide half of that 2.4 bill. So they want the taxpayers to cough up 1.2 billion of the 2.4.
Screw that.
No.
Yeah, I'm with you. I hate taxpayer subsidized
bullshit. No,
private facilities like this.
And moving a stadium from downtown Cleveland is going to hurt downtown Cleveland.
Well, I mean, look,
that's bullshit.
I know this. I have been up there a couple times, and as I walked around that stadium, I thought, this is prime real estate right here.
It is.
I mean, this is like, holy crap, right on the lake.
Yeah.
And, it's like, so I wonder who's buying that real estate and what the development plans are. And, and I wonder, so that's clearly the motivation, right? I mean, I don't know if that stadium's, I don't know if it seems like a really nice NFL stadium to me. I've been there a few times and, who knows, but
I'm sure it can always be better.
We got to get it. We got to get an insight. We got to get a Clevelander on the show to discuss this.
Isn't that stadium built? It's right next to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it's all right down there.
Yeah.
And that stadium was built after the Browns franchise returned to Cleveland, or they created a new one. It's a fairly new stadium, right? I mean, like maybe 20 years old. Or
I guess probably about right.
Yeah.
But it's look, this is like when they built the Denver airport, where they built the Denver airport. It's like who's getting the money from the land, who's paying for it, and what are they going to do with the land that they're departing? It's like I don't know what the connection is of all this, but this is like what I like to say. I would want to know these things before I completely evaluated this decision.
And just the audacity that they are asking us to pay for half of it.
To pay for half, right? Well, this has happened before.
I know it has, and every story with a rebuild or a move of a stadium just blows my mind that they have the audacity to ask us for something. It's just a freaking sporting event.
And look, if it doesn't rise or fall, if it doesn't stand on its own, then
why?
Didn't we do this with the Blue Jackets 2 years ago?
Yeah, exactly.
We went through the same thing.
Yeah, when the mayor at the time saying there's no plan B.
Right.
To build it. And guess what? There was a plan B because the damn thing got built.
It got built, right. So, look, of
Brad,
course you're going to take the free money and say, if I don't get the free money, then we can't build it.
If I recall right, the voters had an issue, the local Franklin County voters had an issue twice on the ballot, and they turned it down twice.
Turned it down.
Yes.
Yeah. And guess what? They built the arena.
It was anyway. It was a grassroots effort, if I remember correctly, too. Grassroots effort to turn it down, and very little money spent.
Yeah.
But they made they made the argument vocally. You heard this doesn't make sense economically, and it was heard.
I wonder though, if it were the Buckeyes. And I get it couldn't be because that's a
I
separate thing. But if it were like because we're talking about the Cleveland Browns here,
I know.
we're talking. So nobody cared about hockey coming or not coming to Columbus. I don't want to say nobody, but it's not like we had a darling hockey team for as long as we can remember. It's like Blue Jackets. What the frick is a Blue Jacket?
Right.
We don't care about hockey here.
Yeah.
We're not paying for any hockey arena. This is stupid. And by and large, like remember that property down there? It still changes hands all the time. The real estate and all this real retail space, but it's Cleveland Browns,
Right. Well,
so,
and
like we don't want to lose those Browns, so we're going to pay for it.
Well, and the Brownie fans, I'm sure, are thinking, "Wow, new stadium, that'd be great. Great new atmosphere." It's like
the Browns
they're going to pay their ticket prices will be unbelievable,
and
unbelievable. They won't
here's the thing: the Browns fans are a breed of their own.
They are for sure.
They will just as soon watch on TV. It's like who knows what they like. You can't predict how they're going to respond to this. Some of them may say this is awesome.
Yeah.
But some, you can just see these old birds carrying dog houses into the dog pound. Saying, rah, 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 rah. I'll sit here and drink my 12-pack. It's like, and I'm with them, man. I love it. I love going up there to watch those guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. They are a unique community. The Clevelanders. I mean, I love them. They're great people, but they live hard, man. I mean, the lake effect snow and all that in the wintertime, it's like Buffalo, New York. You've got to be kind of a different person to survive the winter up there.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
Well, and again, it's that uniqueness of downtown life. And I've forgotten about this, how down in Cincinnati, we went to go see Billy Joel a few years ago after he came back and played at Great American Ballpark. And everyone got out of Great American Ballpark after the concert, and that massive humanity just takes over the streets.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No cars can get through. And I'd forgotten that. This is so cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's just a different feel, and you start to dismantle that by taking those things away.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's better downtown Cleveland.
It just
because
is.
of this, right? It's really
I'll
cool.
tell a little story. I was offered a job in Cleveland to relocate from Columbus, same employer, and he said, "Why don't you just move to Cleveland? We'll pay your all your housing costs and all that to relocate." And I said, "The only way I'll move to Cleveland is if my salary needs to be $1,000 for each cloudy day." and he looked up the average cloudy day in Cleveland was like over 200 days.
Yeah, it's like 300. I remember my buddy who moved to Colorado says, "I moved out here because we get 300 sunny days a year, and you're living in 100."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, look, we ought to comment real quickly about the election, then we probably ought to wrap it up.
Go ahead.
The campaign. I mean, or unless you had something else you wanted to cover, I guess.
No. I actually had a little, Kamala and Tim Walz, a couple of items, but go ahead. I mean,
you're talking about comma chameleon.
Yeah, right.
Comma chameleon.
She is scrubbing. She's trying to scrub her.
She changed her mind.
Past statement. Yeah.
She changed her mind. We should bring you in with it. We'll do another song.
She's reinventing herself. That's
comma the chameleon. So all of a sudden she's moderate on everything.
But what politician does it though?
Oh, I know, but
I know. The
look,
point.
This one is so blatant.
Look,
and the reason what politician doesn't, I get it, but she is as far left and radical as anybody that's ever had any power of this type in our history, right?
Yeah.
And Waltz is no different. And now they're just saying a different thing, and they've painted her up. And I think she's going to win. I mean, I hate to say that, but I am deathly afraid that that there's not enough time to expose all this. Early voting starts when, like in a month?
Yeah, next month.
Right.
Yes, I lost track. I don't know. That's a good point. Yeah.
This is the bait and switch. I mean, this is what makes this so crazy how all this happened. She gets ordained at the last minute, and you can't tell me it wasn't orchestrated. It was absolutely orchestrated. I bet even the timing was orchestrated. But
and she's doing that basement campaign like Biden did.
And she should.
She's not granting press conferences or interviews.
Nobody has asked her any question about a policy. Zero.
So it's all going to be image, her smiley face. And don't I look so youthful compared to Trump? And I'm such a nice person. And, and all of these, aesthetics that just don't matter. It's
You know what,
policies that she needs to
You know,
explain.
I happened upon the Mondale Reagan debate in '84 and watched about a half hour of that. And it was just so refreshing to hear two candidates just stand and
Right.
talk about stuff.
And talk about stuff in a
It was like,
professional,
this is a
courteous,
whole different world 40 years
respectful
ago.
way.
I know. And it just, whether you believed what Mondale or Reagan was saying, it doesn't matter. They were optics back 40 years ago. That was a really interesting debate. They
It
were
was
talking.
dignified.
They were talking.
It was dignified.
Yeah.
And their put downs were much nicer. So I remember Reagan, for example, saying, "I will not hold my opponent's youth and inexperience against him."
Right. It was great. Classic Reagan.
Because they were
Classic
claiming
Reagan. Right.
they were claiming Ronnie, hey, Reagan, you're way older than Mondale.
Well, I knew
you're an
age
old
would come up
guy.
in this, and
he flipped them.
Yeah.
yeah, it was such a great line. One of the best lines in any debate
much
ever.
more civilized.
Yeah.
But I don't know how this thing's going to shake out. I don't have a crystal ball. I fear that that Kamala's going to win, and I am hopeful, however, that at least Congress gets split up, or we can take, or the Republicans will take the other half of it. I just that's the only bulwark against this. I think we're in trouble for a couple of years if that doesn't happen.
And then the Republicans need to get their stuff together to make sure that they can counterbalance.
They can counterbalance
what the Oval Office does, and vice versa too. If Trump would win, just that counterbalance is just slow
the
things
balance
down.
of powers to slow it down.
Yes,
And I think
all the big brain consultants are saying Trump should just stick to three things: BCE, border, crime, economy.
Yeah. So those are the three that every economic class gives a crap about.
That's right.
Color of skin doesn't matter. Those are the three things. Two of three, or at least three things care
What
about.
Trump needs to quit talking about, right, is the 2020 election. He wants to
shut up about that.
Yes.
He needs to quit talking about that, even if it was stolen. Nobody cares. It's over.
Done.
It's done.
And
Quit talking about whether Kamala's black, white, or Indian, or Jamaican. It doesn't make a hill of beans difference.
It doesn't push anything.
Quit talking about anything other than her stupid policies and her radical shift.
And he needs to quit. I agree. And he needs to also quit talking about his court cases.
Yes.
Right?
Quit.
Yes.
Quit.
Just listen. It is unfair, but you got to talk about things that are affecting the American people, not the things that affect you.
Right.
Yep.
Bingo.
Yep.
Turn it around.
That's been Trump's Achilles heel from the outset, though, right? I mean, that is his Achilles heel.
It's all about me. Yeah.
Did you catch his rally in Georgia, for example?
Clips of it. I caught a couple clips of it.
He went, Brett, he went on and on for at least, I would say, 20 minutes about his fellow Republican, Brian Kemp, and that Secretary of State then. He went on and on about, he's talking to the crowd. This is his rally. And he says, you have an awful governor in this state. And he went on and on about the 2020 election and how Brian Kemp.
That's why we have Raphael Warnock in office right now.
That's exactly right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And, he
just
went
dumb
on.
politics.
Yeah. It's like, dude, you need Brian Kemp. You need to mend the fence. Well, that'll never happen now. But
you need Georgia voter. I mean, this is so.
It's so dumb.
It is, but that's his Achilles heel. This is why he's not going to expand his base. I don't think he can.
I don't think so either.
And I think Comma Chameleon is either going to take that base or the people will stay home or skip the top of the ticket. I don't know. But
I would agree with you. There is a strong possibility that a lot of people will not vote, because they're not interested in her.
And they don't want to put Trump there. So
they just won't participate. I could see that happening.
Yep. But it's like we're in dangerous territory here, and it's there for the taking.
And to your point, Steve, we've been down this road where, and I think Brett brought this up, where people campaign in the middle when they're really extremists. And we got deceived by Obama. You know,
Biden.
he pretended I'm going to be a healer, and
No
the
red
first thing
states,
he,
no blue
you know,
states. It's only the United States.
but you know, like race relations took a nosedive under the very guy who could have healed our country,
Yeah.
and really advanced race relations. Curiously enough, like I didn't vote for Obama, but the night that he won, I actually got a little teared up because I saw the celebrations in Lincoln Park up in Chicago, and I thought, you know what?
This might be good.
Maybe the silver lining on this guy coming into office will be that as half black and half white, that he will say, I am the personal embodiment of togetherness and how we can come together and be together and love each other.
Nope.
And
he didn't do it. Quite the opposite.
And he did the opposite.
Yep.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, and to your point of people kind of tapping out on voting, if you don't get a say. You don't get to bitch and moan about anything.
Yeah. If you don't vote,
you don't get a voice at the table if you don't vote.
Yeah.
You don't. And I know we can't check the die on the finger if you voted or not, but it's like you need to shut up for the next 4 years. And you have no place to
Brett, actually, it is a public record about whether or not you voted.
Well, that's true.
Whether you voted, but not. But you could. I think you can skip the top of the tape. You can skip because I do. There are certain elections I skip because I don't know enough to you know.
Sure.
Right.
But I try to educate myself when I see two names for some position I don't know about or care about. I'm like, I'm not educated enough to offer my opinion on this.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, Eric Trump's wife, Laura Trump, is like one of the top people in the RNC now. I don't know.
Yeah.
She's like a bigwig, and one of their strategies is to encourage Republicans or blue dog Democrats, encourage Trump voters to vote early as possible. And the reason why, to Brett's point, the reason why is because they can detect whether or not you voted, and then they won't send you any more mailers. They won't, like your vote has been banked, and they can target their advertising dollars to people who haven't voted yet.
Yeah. Huh. Well, look, I think the Republicans are in trouble here, at least at the top of the ticket. I think that she's going to ride this wave, and unless something happens, like, look, I don't think it's a difficult path for Trump, but what you just described at the Georgia rally is it could not be more opposite of what he needs to be doing.
Exactly.
It could not be more opposite of what he needs to be doing.
It's a lack of discipline.
It just is. He cannot help himself.
That's right.
And
I think there's traces, Steve. I listened to that rally pretty carefully, and I think there's a little some traces of, I don't want to call it senility, but he circles back to those themes 2 or 3 times in the same speech.
Yeah.
And you're like, dude, you already talked about this. Like,
no, he's not a great public speaker.
No,
it's
not really. No.
It's
whether it's senility or just not a good public speaker.
It's both. I think.
I think there's a little bit of both. Yeah.
I don't know if he's senile. I have no idea, but
maybe.
I know both are there, and the RNC speech was way too long and
oh my God,
too much and boring, and but that's Trump. That's what he is. He's always been that way.
Right.
All right.
God,
well, look,
what was it, an hour and 45 minutes or something? It was. It was unbelievable.
Insane.
Well, look, guys, it's probably time to wrap her up. It has been another riveting episode of Common Sense Ohio, and we've got more to come next week at Common Sense Ohio. And if you got a topic you want us to cover, not that there aren't plenty of them out there for us to hit, but commonsenseohioshow.com, like it, share it, be part of it by engaging with questions, comments, concerns. And in the meantime, we're going to continue to do what we do, and that is bring you topics, send out the social media stuff, and make sure that the common sense is spread throughout the land, so should we say. So until next week, we are coming at you right from the middle here from Studio C, commonsenseohioshow.com.